All right, the spiritual leader of the Democratic Party, far-left extremist Hasan Piker, is now touting an anti-Israel litmus test for any Democrat with 2028 presidential aspirations. Take a look at these really repulsive and disgusting remarks.
Will you endorse the 2028 candidate if they are pro-Israel in a way that you don't like? If you ultimately are about defeating fascism in this country as you describe it, surely shouldn't you get on board with whoever the main candidate is?
Luckily, I don't think I will have to make that calculation at all, because there is 0% chance that whoever the elected Democrat is that wins the primary will be pro-Israel in any way, shape, or form. You'll see.
Here with reaction, the host of Life, Liberty, and Levin, and of course his own nationally syndicated radio host. Of course, he's here on the Fox News channel. I call him the Great One, Mark Levin. Mark, this is a guy that blamed America for 9/11/01. There is 0% chance any 2028 Democratic nominee will be pro-Israel. Now, if that's not anti-Semitic bigotry institutionalized in a party, I don't know what is. Your thoughts?
You know, this guy is, well, we're on cable TV. I got to watch it. He's a real lowlife. You know, it's a funny thing, this guy Piker. He doesn't condemn communist China. In fact, he says Mao was the greatest man to ever walk the planet. Right now, communist China has about 2 million Uyghurs, Muslims, in internment camps where they're being raped, tortured, enslaved, and murdered. He says nothing. In Yemen, which is 99% Muslim, 150,000 Muslims have been starved to death and murdered. In the Syrian civil war, 580,000 Muslims were killed, and this lowlife says nothing about any of it. He is obsessed with Jews and Israel. He's obsessed with America. And by obsessed, I mean he hates us. He hates this country. He hates the citizens of this country. He hates the Israelis. He hates Jews. You know, he was raised in Turkey. You know, Turkey, the country that's run by our dear friend Erdogan, who's another Jew hater and Israel hater, and so forth and so on. And he ought to go back to Turkey. I'm really troubled by the fact that we have people coming into this country, or coming back to this country, that hate it so much and spew their poison left and right. I don't know how this guy gets a platform. I don't know how anybody pays to give him a platform. He's not intelligent. He's just a thug. He's just another Jew hater. And you can find them anywhere. You can find them on the street. You can find them anywhere. So this guy gets paid a fortune because he's a Jew hater. Now, as far as the Democrat Party goes, I hate to say this, he's not that far off the mark. The Democrat Party is led by individuals who are Israel haters. By Israel haters, you have to be a Jew hater. It's the only Jewish state that exists. Now, they like to say, well, we don't hate Jews, it's just Israel. Well, that's like saying we don't hate Catholics, we just hate the Vatican. That doesn't make any sense, does it? No, it doesn't. So that some of them try and camouflage their Jew hatred. This guy's out of the closet in many ways. He is what he is. But you have the guys like Van Hollen. You've got guys like Bernie Sanders. You've got people like that. In the House, you've got a whole phalanx of Jew haters and American haters. Every single one of the Jew haters, every single one of the Israel haters hate America. Have you noticed that? And they trash our country as much as they trash Israel. Because Israel and America have things in common. A democracy, representative government, consent of the people. What else do we have? The belief in the Judeo-Christian value system and belief system. We embrace the Enlightenment. Israel embraces the Enlightenment. We do not embrace the ideology of jihadi Islamists. We do not embrace the ideology of Marxists. And that is the modern-day Democrat Party, Marxist Islamists. And that is the modern-day ideology of the Democrat Party. So I expect this from Piker. He is a lowlife. That's exactly what he is. And by the way, there are many like him. Many like him. He's not talented. He's just a vile, poisonous human being. Well, he's a vile, poisonous person anyway. Yeah.
Well, what about the deafening silence of the rest of the party? I mean, they take Mamdani's wife. They won't say a word. The AOC, the squad, there is among many virulent anti-Semitism. They don't hide it. You know, basically, they have now what he's stating on their behalf is he will institutionalize a litmus test against Jewish people. You know, does that mean Josh Shapiro could never be their nominee? Does that mean he has no shot because he's Jewish and I would assume supports Israel? John Fetterman?
Well, you know, Josh Shapiro has his own problems as far as I'm concerned. He's not as moderate as he pretends to be. But you're right, he's off the list. He's Jewish. But it's not just Jewish. It's also going to be evangelical Christians. It's going to be people of faith, a faith that is based in our founding in this country, that serves as the underpinning of our institutions. Remember, these same people, many of them, the Democrats, just like the Democratic Socialists of America, the Marxists, they oppose the Supreme Court. They trash the presidency. They attack the Electoral College. They attack the Senate. The Democrats want 4 more Democrats. The Marxists want to get rid of the Senate altogether. They want to rejigger this society. They want to rejigger human beings because that's what Islamists and that's what Marxists want to do. So they have a lot in common. Now, who stands up to this? What is the oldest religion, Abrahamic religion that exists? Judaism. What's the second one? Christianity. So Judaism and Christianity come under attack. Why? Because they are the bulwark against these ideologies. Marxism believes in no faith, no God. He said it was mysticism. Islamism insists that you either are a true believer to their faith, the radical Islamists, or they'll kill you. And so who stands up to this? Jews, Christians, Israel, the United States. And we are thriving, free, happy societies. And the people who speak like this guy Piker, they're angry, they are evil, and they are diabolical. And the Democrat Party buys into it the way it bought into slavery, the way it bought into segregation, the way it bought into Jim Crow. It is a un-American party, and it's always been an un-American party.
All right, the great one, Mark Levin. We'll be watching Life, Liberty, Levin this weekend. Mark, as always, thank you. All right, thanks for watching. Check out my new podcast, Hanging Out with me, Sean Hannity. The big interviews, the debates you won't get anywhere else. Like and subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.